Hi, this is Alan Gleason for Crossfadr. In this short video, we're going to look at templates in Ableton, what they are and why they're incredibly useful. If you're new to Ableton, you might not realize that you're already using a template. Every time you launch Ableton, the session that gets loaded is a template. You got 2 MIDI tracks, 2 audio tracks, and 2 return tracks. But at the minute, there's no content loaded, so if I play the MIDI tracks or play the session, there's no content within here, so we don't obviously hear any sound. So the reason for setting up your own template is that when inspiration strikes, you can launch Ableton and immediately start producing. In the past, you might have heard musicians talking about they get an idea for a song and immediately they grab a guitar or sit down at a piano and they can start fleshing out that idea straight away. When you're working with a DAW, it's a slightly different situation. Normally when you load a DAW, there's no sounds loaded, there's no samples loaded on any tracks, so no sound is going to be produced. So setting up your own template will allow you to get creating straight away. So look at a basic example of what I might do when setting up a template. Obviously this will change depending on the genre of music you're working on, but I typically like to have my track set up in that I like to have drums on the first track, bass on the second track, keys, and then maybe pad or some other sound effects on the fourth track. Whether you use MIDI tracks or audio tracks for these is down to your own preferences. But for my drums, I always like to use MIDI. So let's label that as drums. For bass, again, I like to use a synth. For something like keys, because I'm not a keyboard player, I might use samples. And then I've also got an external synthesizer here. It's a Korg Poly 800. So I'll just rename this track Poly 800. What I'll also do is I'll create a MIDI track for the Poly 800 if I don't want to play it in live and I want to just record the MIDI of it. So I'll put a track in there. So now we've got a couple of tracks, but again, no sounds. So I'll open up my browser, and for my drums, I'll go to my packs and I'll just select some classic drum kit that I like to start off with. So I'll go to my drum machines and I'll go to something what I like to use to start off with is an 808, and I'll drop that in there. So now in this track I've got drums. For my bass, I'm a big fan of operator. Again, this is down to personal preferences, so I might go in there and I also might, call up a preset just to get me started. It's a bass sound on there. For the keys, because this is a template, I'm not going to load anything here because depending on the song I'm using, I'll be coming here with a fresh idea and I might drag samples in from my sample library or record them in or take them from some other location on my hard disk. For the MIDI, I want to set this track up so that it's playing my external keyboard, so that I need to set my MIDI output to route it to my MIDI port on my sound card. So when I play my MIDI controller or program any information here on the MIDI track, it's going to trigger this keyboard. And then on the audio in track for my synth, I want to set it to external in and select the input of where that actually comes from. So I'll close my browser. So now I have my track set up. If I go onto my drum track and put it into ready record, I can hear we've got our kick drum there, some other sounds. So I can start programming a beat straight away. If I go onto my bass track, I've got my bass sound set up and drop in some samples on my keys, and on my MIDI keyboard for my external are already set up with the MIDI routed and the audio input routed on this track here. I could, if I wanted to, go over to my return section here. By default, you've got a reverb and a delay. So I might just use a shortcut, Command-Alt-T, and add a couple of extra return tracks in. So again, I'll just grab the reverb that's here and I'll copy this over to my other track. I'll use the delay that's here, copy this over to my other track. Typically, I might set up something like a short reverb on one and a bigger reverb on the other. And then on the delay, I might have some variation between these two, different timings. The way you set up these effects depends on the type of production that you're going to be using. Sometimes after you do a quick arrangement, you can save these presets into your template. On my master track, I might put something like an analyzer, so I can analyze the various frequencies and amplitudes that are going on within the mix. So I'll just grab the Ableton Spectrum, put that on my master track, and sometimes I might also just put a limiter on there and set it to be peaking at -0.3 so that I'm not getting any clipping on my master track. So I'll close this down again. If I was happy with all my routing, my configuration of my instruments, my return tracks, my master track, now I can save this template. So I'll press Command and comma to call up my preferences, and I go into the file and folder section, and then at the top here you can see save current set as the default. So I'll click on save and I'll close this down. So now if I hit Command N for a new session, do I want to save the current one? Sometimes I will save this into a templates folder because, you know, as time goes by, your template might vary. And sometimes you might want to choose a different template, save that, or you might go back to a previous template. So anytime I create a template, I will always save this somewhere on my hard disk so I can come back to it later. So for the minute, I don't actually want to save this. So when the new session loads, you can see that it's exactly the same as the previous one, with our tracks set up the way we wanted to, with the return tracks and our master track setup. So we can immediately dive in, start producing and working on the idea that we have. If you found this video useful, please like and subscribe to the Crossfadr YouTube channel for further updates.